Today we're very excited and very privileged and very honored to have two outstanding, reputable, internationally acclaimed guests, Hossein Al-Qazwini.
I've heard of Muhabban from a long time. A youth group that has translated into a mosque or into a center that has their own place, I haven't heard of. This fascinating, beautiful church that is now has become a mosque or a center.
And the renowned Dr. Ammar Nakshawani.
Either Ahl al-Bayt comes first in my life or they come second. You've got a group of people who are like, well, when it suits me, I'll go. But at the moment, it doesn't suit me to go. The northwest region of the UK is one steeped in phenomenal history of servitude to Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam.
Would you take it as offensive if someone challenged you on something?
It depends on the approach.
Okay.
Some can be offensive. Some can be very harsh and they attack, and there's no red lines.
I don't think someone should take it offensively if you are told by somebody to stay away from a certain discussion.
Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. Thank you for joining us for another episode of MYF Talks. I'm your host today, Brother Hossein Al-Qazwini, and I'm my colleague, Muhammad Dawood Jafri. And today we're very excited and very privileged and very honored to have two outstanding, reputable, internationally acclaimed guests today. None other than the dearest are Hossein Al-Qazwini. Assalamu alaikum, Sayyid.
Assalamu wa rahmatullah.
And the renowned Dr. Ammar Nakshawani. Sayyid, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Thank you.
God bless.
So we're really honored to have you with us. So thank you for your time.
It's a pleasure and honor.
Thank you. Yeah, and obviously we're here today in our new center, the My Community Project. And obviously, Sayyid, you've had a long relationship with Muhabban over the last sort of...
Wrong or long?
Long, very long. Well, hopefully not wrong. Over the last 10, 15 years.
Yes.
You've seen our development and our growth. And I guess Sayyid Hossein is a bit new to this because it's the first time you've joined us here at Muhabban.
That's correct.
So it's interesting to get both your perspectives really as someone that's known us for, I guess, best part of more than a decade or so. And you say there's someone that's come in fresh. Just your perspectives and what your thoughts have been and how you've seen that journey, I guess, evolve over the years.
Alhamdulillah, on my end, I've always been very comfortable. I first came to Manchester well over 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I remember Al-Marhoom, dearly departed Abu Hassan Aboud, had been instrumental in pushing for English programs for not just the Iraqi youth, but the northwest region. The northwest region of the UK is one steeped in phenomenal history of servitude to Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam. I don't know, Sayyidina, how much you know about this region, which has Lancashire, Yorkshire.
Right.
So you're going Manchester, Bradford, Burnley, Blackburn, amongst another of other places which we could mention where your families, I'm sure, go back in some cases maybe even of service 50 years to those who first came to the northwest region. So he had invited me amongst other speakers because his son Hassan had been a fan of my majalis, which were at that time aired on Ahl al-Bayt TV.
Mm-hmm.
And so he invited me to Manchester. My personal history with Manchester goes back to my father, who's a Manchester boy in reality, because my father came to Manchester at the age of 18. And he lived in Hume.
Okay.
And there was a Iraqi community in Manchester in the 70s, of whom I think half of them are now in Parliament. And so credit goes to someone like him for looking out for the youth and for looking out for the future of their belief system. Mm-hmm. So what was achieved by him at that time was something fantastic. And then to see you guys as the graduates of such programs in one way or the other continue to take this on. And really, you are Muhabban of the prophetic household. I can vouch for that. The programs that we've had together have been in places that more often than not have been rented. Mm-hmm. I'm so inspired to see that now we have a place we could call home.
Alhamdulillah.
And I'm sure Said Hussein in these last few nights has also felt a similar vibe.
Yes, absolutely. I don't remember when exactly was my first time to Manchester, maybe 2009 or 10. And I also do remember Abu Hassan Aboud, rahmatullah alayh. And he was one of the reasons why I came as well. So my history with Manchester has always been associated with the IUS, which I've come to know that they're no longer active. But they did some excellent work in the past. Maybe they were among the first who did English programs here in Manchester, working on the youth. So I came a couple of times, one time in Arba'in, one time in the month of Ramadan. And of course, I've heard of Muhabban from a long time, but I hadn't had the honor of being at your service until
thank you. Yeah.
now. What I enjoyed during this majlis, specifically during the days of Fatimiyya, is two things. Number one, your new place. This fascinating, beautiful church that has become a mosque or a center. And I don't know, Sayyidina, but from the youth groups that I've lectured at and the ones that I know, from California all the way till New Zealand, a youth group that has translated into a mosque or into a center that has their own place, I haven't heard of.
That's very rare.
I've spoken at many youth groups or majalis for youth, but they usually rent out. But for them to purchase a place and have their own mosque, this is something very rare. So I'm very proud of you for purchasing this place. It's very beautiful. It has a beautiful feeling to it. And you've inaugurated it with the Shahada of Fatima Zahra Salamullah alayha. And the other thing that I enjoy is that the majlis is run by youth.
Yes.
They're all youth, from A to Z. From the presenters, from the organizers, from the donors, from those who are funding the project. They're all youth. And you have a variety, a great variety from the Pakistani community, from the Iraqi community, Khoja, Iranian, Afghan, Lebanese. So you get a wide variety of audience here at Muhabban. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm very proud of what you're doing. And I pray for your continued success, inshallah.
Thank you so much. So I guess my question to you is then, obviously, if you've traveled so far and you've seen all these different communities and things, how do we keep the youth engaged? I think it's very important now that we've got our own place to utilize the space. So what are the best ways and mechanisms that we can do to take advantage of that?
Sure. One way is to stay relevant. Youth want to hear something new. They want to hear something that applies to them and their life. Something that I hear from a lot of kids, a lot of youth, is that we've heard it all. We've heard this. So to present something new and something relevant as well, something that has an effect on their lives, bringing their favorite speakers, bringing the speakers that relate to them. This will draw a crowd. This will make sure that they come. Delegating to them as well, making sure that all the youth have a role, either in reciting Quran or announcing or taking care of the parking lot, or not just working, but leadership roles, giving youth the chance to lead and to make decisions. This will draw them for sure, and this will give them a sense of belonging, that they're not just attending here, but they're leading in this organization, and they're taking charge. This is important. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would delegate to youth. Osama bin Zayd was 17 years old. He made him the commander of an army. Amir al-Mu'mineen was young, and Rasulullah made him a commander. Delegating to youth is something very important.
Okay, great. And Sayyid Ammar, over the years, I guess your experiences of youth services has I guess shaped how you are as a speaker and orator. What was most beneficial to you when you were growing up, and what kind of programs were done and catered for you at the time that you think that we could do?
I think first and foremost, the centers that I grew up in London did not suffocate the youth. It was very normal to stay in the mosque till 1 a.m. Now, sadly, by 9 o'clock, you have a generation who are just like, hurry up, we need to get home. What you don't realize is those youth may only come for 3 lectures in 3 months. There's a Fatimiyya, 3 nights. That might be the only 3 lectures they have until, for example, Shahr Ramadan. You can't suffocate them in this period. I am not going to deny that noise is a factor. I'm not going to deny that we all have busy lives. But my parents had no issue with me being at the mosque as a child on a school night, Tuesday night. It wasn't just a matter of we do all our programs on Saturday. Our world can either revolve around Ahlul Bayt or we make Ahlul Bayt revolve around our world. This is a very important point. Either Ahlul Bayt comes first in my life or they come second. You've got a group of people who are like, well, when it suits me, I'll go. But at the moment, it doesn't suit me to go. Life's going well, you know, and schools and kids and secular education, I want them to graduate, and which aren't bad things. But ultimately, everything that we have is because of the legacy and the teachings of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and their sacrifices. Those mosques which I grew up in did not suffocate us. That's number one. Number two, me and Said Hussein, we were discussing a couple nights ago of the legacy of people like Said Majid Al-Khou'i. You know, the Al-Khou'i mosque in London. Said Majid Al-Khou'i would talk to the child like he'd talk to the adult. There wasn't a favoritism involved. There wasn't a looking at the rich and looking after them more than the poor, or the poor, you know, were not delegated positions. So therefore, when you went to the mosque, you always felt like, you know what, that's the Maulana, for example, who's very easy to talk to and who's not going around the mosque looking to tell us off. Thirdly, there was a separate section for us, which I think the way it's evolved is being good. But in those days, there was a separate section that understood a 5-year-old should not necessarily be forced to sit in a 1-hour lecture on a difficult theological or legal concept. Hence, when you took me on the tour today, and I saw there's a separate room or creche for kids, that's perfect. People used to say to us, why, when kids move in your lectures, you get angry? You know, why don't you just stay calm? Even if you're about to say a whole khutbah, you should stay calm. If the kid moves, you could do the khutbah and the kid moving at the same time. No, unfortunately, Allah has not gifted us these things. When the child was moving, it's not the child's fault. The child has been forced to be in an environment which makes no sense for them in terms of concentration. In terms of barakah, it is the best. Let them hear crying, let them see latom, let them. Of course. But in terms of education, there should be a room for those children where there's a bit of play and there's a bit of teaching about whose night it is. And those factors were vital in making me love the mosques that I grew up under in London. No suffocation, good akhlaq by the leadership, and an understanding of the minds of all the congregants.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned, Sayyidina, you mentioned that when you were growing up, you had these centers available. But when you were growing up, the English lecturing scene wasn't the same as it is now.
Yeah.
Now we have a whole host of options. And we'll get into how we go around sort of sifting through and picking speakers and making sure they're suitable for the community that we serve. What did you do back then? Of course, you pioneered it in one way. What did you do with the people around you that couldn't maybe understand Arabic or Urdu or Farsi, that they would go into the centers and just be like, this is not for me?
Yeah, we were outstanding Muslims. Standing outside. Really, I'm telling you, a couple of my really good friends in London, Uday, Ala, amongst others, and if they watch this, they'll remember, we used to turn up to the Al-Khou'i mosque. Queen's Park, you know, is down the road from the mosque. We'll play football for 2.5 hours while the majlis is happening. Wow. What am I going to be doing listening to an Arabic speaker, with all due respect, who probably I love now, or I revere now, or I respect now, but at that time, as a 16-year-old, you're kidding me.
You don't appreciate him.
I don't appreciate him. He's not talking my language. The topic as well is nothing to do with my life.
Yeah.
But I was in the environment. That was the most important thing. There's food, there's latom, and see how red my chest will be. Yeah. You know, we used to all look under our shirt to see how. That environment is very important. Credit to the Khaja community, who had been more established And they had someone like Mullah Asghar who was ready to change languages on different nights because they understood they had a young English generation. So, you know, he was proficient in Farsi, in Arabic, in Urdu, in Swahili, in Gujarat. All of these languages he could speak, but he used to give Friday night majalis in English. My mother, may God bless her, she would make sure that those Fridays, if we could, we try and go to an English lecture, just to maybe one or two of those words will affect us. So that was pivotal for me. People now don't know how blessed they are sometimes. Maybe there's a complacency now, I must say, that they've got so used to so many English programs that it's just like, oh, you know what, I really can't be bothered today. And they don't realize.
They're taken for granted.
Take it for granted. If you come to, say, Sayyid Hussein is lecturing here in Fatimiyya, your ultimate aim at the beginning is to gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The medium of gaining closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is through the speaker and the words that he's giving you. If the speaker's words, if you come with a good attitude, you will learn. It doesn't matter which speaker in the world.
Yeah.
Your attitude has an effect on your learning.
Yeah.
Because 30% of learning is intellect and 70% is attitude.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I can say the same. One of my questions is, so obviously we talked about there's a plethora of speakers available. A lot of information is now readily available, you know, through AI, Google, etc. So there's a lot of diversity of thought, especially with the youth that are growing up. So we're challenged to challenge the status quo. So how do we do that as an organization in a safe environment where, yes, we can ask the pertinent questions, we can challenge what the speakers are saying, but also not derail people or be a platform where people, you know, are getting led astray. So how do we harbor that balance, and what advice do you have?
Sure. This is a piece of advice that I give to many centers that ask me for my personal opinion, and especially youth groups. Who should we invite? Who should we not invite? I tell them, by default, you should invite everyone, except someone who's been proven to be a deviant and has gone in a different direction. Then that's a different story. Otherwise, give people a chance. Give people a chance. MashaAllah, there's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of events. There's so many wafayat and mawalid, birthdays and demises of the Ahlul Bayt. Invite a wide variety of speakers. Listen to them. See what they have to say. And if they say something that is controversial, make sure you tell them. Make sure that you hold them accountable. Make sure that there's a Q&A after the lecture where you question them. You said this and this. What's your proof? What's your evidence? And what do you have to back? This is what the Quran says. The Quran says, فَبَشِّرْ عِبَادِ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقَوْلَ فَيَتَّبِعُونَ أَحْسَنَهُ. Give glad tidings to my servants, those who listen, يَسْتَمِعُون. Those who those who have an open ear, a lending ear, those who listen, they keep an open mind. يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقَوْلَ فَيَتَّبِعُونَ أَحْسَنَهُ. And then they abide by that which is best, meaning that which is most compatible to the Quran, to the teachings of Ahlul Bayt, to reason.
Sure.
Why do we have to put an X on this person or that person or this person? Because of their followership of a marji'iyya, or because of one thing that they said a few years back at some Islamic centers? Let's be open to a wide variety of scholars, but at the same time, by holding them accountable.
Sure.
That let the scholar know that whatever he says on the mimbar, later on, he will be held accountable and will be questioned for things that he said. He will be asked for proof and evidence to support his argument. This way, we could facilitate a wide variety of speakers and scholars. I don't know. Maybe you disagree, Sayyidina.
No, I actually agree. And the only thing I would add is that there has to be someone who is, in a way, your religious advisor.
Yeah.
That has to be there.
Yeah.
You won't necessarily always be able to ascertain, you know, the opinions that are posited. If it's said in a right way, said in a nice way, you might think it's right. You know, so I think on the one hand you need that. On the other hand, also, not everybody should have a Q&A. There is no harm with that. In the first couple of years of, certainly in my,
There was no cure.
I wasn't, there are sometimes they'd ask me questions on certain issues where I have not at all mastered that science. I'll say, I'm sorry, it's not my area. I cannot answer. So the whole idea that because a speaker has come into town, we have to have a Q&A with them, a Q&A with someone who's had 2 years of Muharrams versus someone with 25 years of Muharrams, it's two different worlds.
Sure.
You know, with all due respect, just because you have 2 years of Muharram, 3 years, doesn't mean that you're not knowledgeable, by the way. Someone might have decided to do majalis at the end of their studies even, which is not a bad thing at all. But there's a difference between somebody who has gone across the board. There are question and answer sessions of theirs available online where you could see 30, 40, 50 questions being asked to them and their answers versus somebody who has never had many lectures or Q&As online. How then are you trusting that person to be able to have that? So don't force yourself that any speaker that comes, we have to have a Q&A.
One of the things you mentioned, holding speakers to account. Maybe one reason we may sometimes hold back is, look, we're fairly young. Most of the respected speakers and scholars that come are experts in their fields. We sometimes feel like it may come off as offensive. Would you take it as offensive if someone challenged you on something from the committee that invited you?
I think it would depend on how I'm being questioned.
Interesting.
Yeah, if it's constructive criticism, or if someone tells me that you said something that goes against the status quo, or we haven't heard from other scholars, can you provide evidence or proof? I don't think that's offensive at all. On the contrary, it becomes my responsibility to provide for proof and evidence for my claim. It depends on the approach. Some can be offensive. Some can be very harsh and they attack, and there's no red lines. But there's one thing that I want to say and that is vetting is also very important. Inviting just random speakers is not enough. Today, we were discussing this with Sayyid Ammar a couple of nights ago. Today, we live in the age of social media, in the age of Instagram, and the age of reels. One reel can go viral and make a speaker that has no clue what he's talking about, or hasn't set foot at a seminary or at an academic institution. He can become the most popular speaker, and will have people lining up to get him to speak. Instagram should not be the criteria. Having a popular reel or a viral reel should not be the criteria. This person should be vetted. Where has he studied? How much experience does he have in Islamic knowledge? What does he know? Who can vet? Who can support? Who knows this? Who knows this individual? From which community? What's interesting is that I see some speakers who speak in other communities, but no one in their own community will give them a platform. Doesn't this raise a question? When your own community, the city that you grew up in, let's say, for example, Atlanta, Georgia, or I don't know where, the centers don't give you a platform, but you've become someone very popular in another city. This raises a question as where have you come from? What do you know? What do people know about you? Are you qualified to be able to preach? At the end of the day, youth are listening to you. A speaker has a lot of authority, has tremendous authority, and can influence. So we have to be careful who do we give that authority to, because at the end of the day, we'll be responsible.
Communication beforehand, I think, is also important. Because I think in the lead up to a Muharram, you probably have booked the person way in advance. There's got to be a communication to say, look, for example, if we can suggest, look at the wording, if we could suggest certain topics to maybe have a look at, because it seems to come up a lot in our communities, or if you don't mind, if we can stay away from certain discussions. I don't think someone should take it offensively if you are told by somebody to stay away from a certain discussion. Of course, that person might turn around to you and say, then maybe we're not suited for each other. And it's better that we tell each other from now.
But Sayyidina, as long as it's not 3 days before Muharram.
There you go.
This before,
of course,
in advance.
Of course, and that's why I said, even you normally book Muharram speakers way in advance, and so that communication, I think will help, because then no one later on could say, you told me to do this on this night. Why couldn't you have just told me 3 months ago to do this?
Absolutely.
Why now have you insisted that I have to do this? Alhamdulillah, you guys at Muhibban, you're great communicators. This is a plus on you. That, you know, you're open, you talk and so on. The criticism of the content of a discussion, that, you know, I don't know how beneficial it's going to be on night 5 of Muharram to discuss the content of something which is now gone. The only thing you may be able to say is, can we have a disclaimer to say always on a YouTube page, the views of the speaker do not necessarily reflect the views of the
Institution.
There's nothing wrong with that, because then no one can say, oh, you people invited so, you know, we invite so and so. But we have made clear that not every view of every speaker, and we're perfectly fine with that as well. I'm perfectly fine if someone writes the views of the speaker doesn't represent the opinions of the organization. What's wrong with that? There's no issue. Yeah.
I think historically we've had the challenge of discussing pertinent but controversial topics, but balancing that with the sensitivities of the cultural society that we are here in Manchester. For example, maybe 3 Muharrams ago, we invited a speaker who wanted to discuss intimate issues surrounding marriage, for example, during the month of Muharram, which is very pertinent, very relevant. However, then we receive a lot of criticism from that. So how do we navigate those sensitivities, but also address topics which are of great importance?
Sure.
Go ahead, son.
The Sayyid said something very important: communication beforehand. If the speaker and yourself agree upon a topic that you deem is important, you feel that it is necessary for your community, and you relay this to the speaker, but at the same time you tell them that you have to be, you know, politically correct, or you have to take in consideration that the majlis, there's kids from 3 years of age until the elders attend. You have to take all of this into consideration. I think you can. I think speakers and scholars have done an excellent job of discussing very sensitive topics, but in a very professional manner.
Sometimes it's tough for the speaker as well.
Yeah.
Of course.
You see, because what you want him to fit every box. Talk about contemporary, talk about history. Talk about aqeedah, but don't be controversial. Be sensitive, but don't be this. In the Pakistani community, we do not discuss marriage in Muharram. But in the Iraqi community, we want social issues in Muharram. Remember one thing with the English majalis, is that they transcend cultures. Today, alhamdulillah, God blessed me, that I can say I have spoken for every culture of Shia in the world. I think Sayyid Hussein is pretty much similar. Most of the places we've lectured in, we could tick off boxes where if we gave lectures in Arabic, 70% of those places would never think of calling us. I have come to learn with experience a number of things, but that's with experience. That on the 7th of Muharram in the Iraqi community, it is the night of Hazrat Abbas. But on the 8th of Muharram in the Daisy community, it is the night of Hazrat Abbas. I have come to learn, in some communities, you might say a small joke. How could he joke in Muharram? I've come to learn in other communities, smile a bit more. Why are you so serious? It's that, what do I do? If I go like this, a person will look at me and say, this guy's lost it. True. 1 minute he's smiling, next minute, hi. To try and balance all of these things, it's the poor speaker who's tried his hardest to pick a topic that is so pertinent, is now being attacked. Why? Because he said Imam al-Mahdi doesn't exist? Or because he said Imam al-Sadiq is not ma'soom? No, because he picked the topic of this in Muharram. Who? Let's be real. Let's be real. Lectures, 1 hour in Muharram is not something from the time of the Imams. If you want to be real, if someone wants to say this is not the culture of Ahl al-Bayt, the culture of Ahl al-Bayt in Muharram was that Imam would say, read for us some poetry, some noha, and then make us cry.
There was no lecture involved.
There's no lecture.
Poetry.
No.
So therefore this, when someone comes and tells you it is not the way it's done. The way it's done according to who? Because if it's the way it's done according to the Imams, a lot of the things that we are doing were not part and parcel of the Muharrams of the Imams.
So I guess the challenge is that we have it. So MYF is very diverse.
Can I just add one thing, Reza?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No.
But it might even summarize the next couple of questions. You cannot please everyone.
Ahsant.
Very true.
So if once someone came to me and said, you said something in a majlis and, people, they, because you said it, they stopped liking you. I said, yeah, that's fine. So he said, oh, and you, I'm like, no, I'm not in this for people to like me. I've got a day of judgment. I've got to answer God about my conscience, my sincerity, why I said something. I'm more worried about answering my Lord on the day of judgment than what someone thinks of me. Because if I'm going to give lectures thinking everybody should like me, I am in the wrong job. Steve Jobs used to say, if you want people to like you, go and sell ice cream.
Very true.
I don't need
You're going to offend, no matter what.
whatever you do.
If you're not offending someone, you're doing something wrong. You're doing something wrong because that's the job of the speaker, to address people's problems and issues. I'm sure you've seen this, Sayyidina. When I go to some communities, a wife will come and tell me, Sayyid, you have to talk about
the rights
husband,
of the wife.
Yeah, the rights of a wife, or the husband going out too much. She chooses the topic that benefits her, and the husband wants the topic that benefits him. He doesn't want to hear about the husband having to spend or having to spend more time with his wife. So you're doomed to offend. If you speak more about women's rights, you'll offend some men. If you speak about men's rights, you'll offend women.
And I'll add one more to that. You said right of the female, you've ticked a box. Right of the husband, for example, you've ticked a box. Then there's still someone out there who's like, isn't there more deeper topics? Okay. Then you go to a deeper topic, you'll have someone else saying, but it's not relatable to us in the West. Do I mind? No, I don't lose any sleep. No. Because at the end of the day, when someone comes and tells me, for example, we want more majalis on this topic, I could do two things. One is I could say, go back to Muharram 2013. It's on YouTube. You can listen to all my lectures on those topics. Or number two, in all honesty, at the end of the day, there are other speakers you could listen to who might be addressing this in Muharram. I have an angle to address. They have an angle to address. You could go on YouTube online afterwards and go and listen to someone else. If you guys are going to be super worried about people's feedback, then you're in the wrong place. If you are more interested in saying, that's constructive, that sounds okay, we will definitely pass on the message to the speaker, and we hope the speaker will take this on board. That's good akhlaq. That is addressing a situation. You're not being rude to somebody. There are some people who, the moment there is a complaint about a majlis, their whole demeanor that night becomes so depressing.
Yes.
Relax. You're not the one who's got to sit there and watch every word. Yes, you have an important position of responsibility, but don't lose sleep because someone complained. We had complaints that the food was a bit late. Okay, you know what? Maybe we should work next time on the organization skills, and inshallah we will improve. Don't then turn around and say, all of you have to. It's got to be a relaxing as well.
Yeah. At the end of the day, especially today, as Muhibban, you've transformed into a center now. It's not just a group, a youth group, but more of a center, an Islamic center. And I give the example of an Islamic center as a hospital. You're like a hospital that treats people, but you treat people spiritually and emotionally, not physically. And a patient that goes into a hospital, he can't dictate the medicine that he wants. It's up to the doctor to decide which medicine is befitting of the patient, whether he likes it or he doesn't. But at the end of the day, it's better for him. You serve the same purpose. As an Islamic center, you're healing people's emotional issues, spiritual issues. There are things that they have to hear, whether they like it or they don't. Receiving negative feedback, it doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. It doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. It could actually mean that you're letting people hear that which they have to hear, that which they should hear, but they're not hearing it anywhere else. And that's the job of the Islamic Center, for them to hear an admonishment that they're not hearing at work, at school, and at home. So don't be offended. I reiterate what the Sayyid says. Don't be offended, or don't feel that you're failing because you received negative feedback or comments. No, you might be be on the right path.
Interesting. I want to move the discussion on just a little bit further. Your generation of scholars and speakers had a particular role to play in the Western world. Where do you see Shia scholars, Shia speakers in the West going next? Because the next generation, from what we see, is Instagram, TikTok, quick sound bites. That's what it is. That's what they want. That's what they focus on. It's almost some sort of a pseudo religiosity that a lot of people portray, primarily just to get those 10, 20-second clips out there. Where do you see the future of English-speaking scholars in the Western world?
Like, on my angle, I established the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam Institute for Islamic Studies. It was a reflection more on me than on the community. Because I thought to myself, all these years I've given majalis, and while I have certain years of majalis where I've had structured, what I could say are 23 one-hour lessons or 30 one-hour lessons, how many of the courses that I studied at the Hawza could I really say that I came back to teach? Because I feel we lack a relationship with our primary sources and our primary heritage. I have people around me here, all watching this podcast. I can guarantee you that the people sitting here have hardly opened a chapter of Al-Kafi themselves to read their heritage. Some may not even own the volumes of Al-Kafi. And you know, I was just about to say, but it's in English. But for me, while a community loses track with Arabic, it can never flourish to its true potential. It will do well. Listen, we have done amazing. What I'm talking about is not to look back negatively, but the next step.
Exactly.
You know, sometimes a person, when they talk about what do you think of the community? Community is negative, community is bad. No. Our parents, they laid the foundation. Our parents protected our aqa'id. The next step, you're asking us, my opinion, the next step is that we need to reacquaint our communities with their heritage in the world of Islamic literature. I say this why? Because there's so many real lessons to learn when you look at ahadith of Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam in books like Al-Kafi. Honestly, even for us, the chapter on ilm in Al-Kafi, it is unbelievable the number of ahadith where you look at yourself in the mirror when you're looking at that hadith. What's the difference between a scholar and an orator? What's the niyyah behind seeking knowledge? How does God view those who seek knowledge? Why should you seek knowledge? Believe you me, if I was more acquainted with these 20 years ago, a lot of my behaviors in the last 20 years, I would have reassessed. But it's only because when I first went into studying in a traditional seminary, I might have focused a bit more in those earlier days on more legal, early texts, or maybe hadith texts. I find it sad that the addressing of the importance of the Arabic language and the addressing of the primary sources, of which the Quran is the utmost importance. Do you know, sometimes, I don't know about yourself, but when I love Mecca and Medina, and I love Salat al-Jama'ah, and someone might turn around to me and say, oh, Salat al-Jama'ah, you're praying behind someone who's not Shia. What I love about it, when I hear the Quran being recited, I test myself. When he says an ayah randomly from Surah Al-Imran or from Surah Al-An'am or from Surah Al-Shu'ara, when he says it, can I clock which chapter and verse that is? I can guarantee you, we have a great generation of shabab in khidmah, in service, organizing majalis, some who love to sit in lectures and learn. But is the relationship with the tafsir of the Quran the same? His father in Karbala, the amount of importance that he gave to tafsir of the Quran in his 80s. We're not talking somebody in his 40s. So he could have easily retired by that time. I said, listen, let someone else do it. True. Tafsir al-Sadiq, if I'm not mistaken.
بينات من الهدى.
بينات من الهدى. But there was a YouTube page that had all his lectures.
تفسير المرتضى.
المرتضى, that's it. That tafsir, or that commitment, highlighted that a generation that has no relationship with their heritage of the Quran, heritage of hadith, structured learning, I think that for me is the next step for scholars and speakers to give back. 10 nights here, 3 nights here is good. But you're getting a fragment of law, a fragment of theology, a little bit on hadith. You're not going through 101, 202, 303, 404.
Fundamentals.
There are people who've made efforts with e-houses. And I think that the intention behind them is very good, is that someone can come and pick a course and they do it for about 8 months, where you get a real, more deeper understanding of your heritage. That for me, I would say is the next step. That I would love to see the speaker who claims they were studying in Qom or in Najaf or in a Hawza or in a traditional seminary. I would love to see them teach a course on that subject. So Hossein, for example, now, not only did he study jurisprudence or principal jurisprudence or hadith, but he also came back to teach. There are many who studied those things but are not coming back to teach them. You people are doing great in your 9-to-5 jobs, but you deserve us coming back to teach what we studied.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I am very hopeful for the future of English majalis. I've heard from several individuals that we have the option of attending an Arabic majlis or a Farsi majlis or an Urdu majlis, but we prefer the English majlis. Not because of the language, they speak other languages, but because they find English majalis to be more carrying more depth. And I think this is very significant when English speakers, of course not all, but some, they have more depth than an Arabic or Farsi or Urdu lecture. This tells you that we're going in the right direction, inshallah. We're going in the direction. You see, when we started speaking in the early 20s, early 2000s, 2001, 2002, we didn't have a model to follow. We didn't have a model to follow because we were the first to speak in English. There were other majalis who, you know, in the middle of the lecture, in an Urdu lecture, they'd throw in a bit of English. In the middle of an Arabic or Farsi lecture, they'd throw in a bit of English. But there was no English majalis up until 2001, 2002, 2003. We didn't have a model to follow. Today, the speakers that are up and coming, they have a model. They have models. There's a, you know, maybe there's no instruction kit of how to become an English speaker, but there's a wide majority, a vast majority of a good number of English speakers today that they can emulate, that they can learn from. There's experienced speakers where they can learn from. While when we started speaking, I mean, it was a new field.
Yeah,
we were going into something very new, into the unknown. But alhamdulillah, it succeeded. That this project succeeded. The project of English majalis succeeded, and we find English majalis everywhere around the world.
Alhamdulillah.
This is something very positive.
Yeah.
And I think we're going in the right direction. And eventually, majalis in the US and Canada and Europe, they'll turn towards English majalis.
Sure.
It will be, every day we'll see less and less of Urdu, Farsi, Arabic, and we'll see more of English.
Sure.
I think we're headed in that direction, inshallah.
So to prepare for that, has the Hawza, you're of course a professor at the Hawza in Karbala, has a module been introduced, for example, teaching or speaking in the West, for example, for some of the students at the Hawza?
Something very minimal, unfortunately. Something very minimal. Today, in some seminaries in Najaf, they ask the student coming in, especially from the West, what is your goal? What is your job? Do you want to become a mujtahid or do you want to become a speaker? If you want to become a mujtahid, you'll have a different curriculum. It's going to be a different curriculum. The fiqh that you take, usul al-fiqh, it's going to be more in-depth. But if your goal is to become a speaker, a well-rounded speaker that benefits people in the West, then we'll have a different curriculum for you. This is something new. This is happening, but it's small. It's a work in progress, and it's not. Personally, I don't think it's up to the bar. Our seminaries have to concentrate more on raising and producing muballighin and scholars and speakers for the West. Someone who wants to become a speaker in the West doesn't necessarily have to study 6 years of usul al-fiqh,
No.
or 7 years of usul al-fiqh, or derivative fiqh for 7 years. For them, it could be a waste of time. Instead, they could take tafsir, they could take akhlaq, they could take the history of Rasulullah and the Ahl Bayt. I think our seminaries need to work on this more.
I taught last year we named the Sheikh Ahmed Al-Wa'ili public speaking course. We had 16 people join. And amongst them were people who wanted to be speakers, and there were people who were hedge fund managers, doctors, lawyers, opticians, dentists. A couple were, homemakers. And it was a brilliant course. A couple of them have majalis coming up in Shahr Ramadan, and it was an 8-week course about intention behind lecturing, preparing a lecture, structuring a lecture, oratory, memorization techniques, amongst other subjects. How do you interact with a crowd depending on culture? I gave them each culture and my experiences from each culture. And it was free for Hawza students to join. So if you were a student at Hawza anywhere in the world, you could join the class in that 8-week course. We're running it again, inshallah, from January or April onwards. Everyone's more than welcome to join. And even if you have people who you think are up and coming, because I don't know how much you've experienced this, but sometimes I found that our peers of our age group are a lot more willing to admit they benefit and learn from each other and reach out to each other when they have questions.
Right.
Whereas sometimes you might find someone up and coming young will not reach out to say that, listen, can you help me improve my structure, my preparation, or admit that, I need a bit more work on this. So when I did this course, the whole aim was that there's no harm sitting under someone who's done this for years. One of the biggest tests you face, which I was also in the course, was how does a speaker deal with fame at a young age? You'd never think that's in a speaking course.
Yeah.
The speaker course is how to prepare a lecture. No, how do you deal with fame at a young age? How do you deal with criticism at a young age? Do you have to give all your opinions? So really it was reflections on my own majalis.
Yeah.
Sayyidina, when we started 24, 25 years ago in speaking, there was no ChatGPT.
No.
There was no Google. No. We had to make an effort to go out and find the fact.
Yeah.
A date, an event, a story, a musibah. It required work.
It did. It was
required
hard.
work, putting effort into a lecture. Today, the new speakers, they face a major challenge, the challenge of ChatGPT and Google. Why do I say it's a challenge? Of course, things are easier for them, but they're not exerting an effort. The facts and the information are coming to them with a press of a button.
Which majlis do you remember having lots of books in your luggage when you went? I vividly remember going to a lecture in Cape Town, South Africa, 2004. I had maybe 30 books in my luggage. Wow. Because in those days, you can't go on your phone, Nokia 3310 or whatever it's called, and type Al-Kafi and look for the tradition. So we used to carry in luggage 30 books.
Wow.
And you're struggling to look for references and prepare and so on.
Ahsant. Finding one hadith could take several hours.
Yeah.
I've heard of a hadith, but I want to get it, perfectly. Yeah. I've heard it from my father or someone else, but I want the actual hadith. It would take hours.
And you remember CD-ROM and the Noor software had come out, and then it'd keep breaking down as you were about to reach a particular hadith, then the whole thing will crash. And maybe sometimes the odd monster might appear on your screen, virus detected or something.
Sayyidina, finding a verse. Today, you
Yes,
could
yes.
easily finding a verse. How would you find a verse 25 years ago? You know a part of the verse. You don't know the full verse. Finding a verse was something.
Yeah.
Searching for that verse. Things have changed today, and I don't know if the new speakers are, up to the challenge of not depending on these new gadgets and new vehicles of information like ChatGPT and Google, but actually making the effort, having the foundation of looking for that information on your own.
Or gadgets, navigate them, but you won't navigate how to deal with a Pakistani community. That ChatGPT will not tell you how to deal with the Iraqi community from Najaf versus one from Basra, for example. Those you have to pick up. And I'm sure you've done the same, in terms of the experience of someone like your father, or others have done the same in their experience where they've asked people who've been to Majaz for years, giving lectures for years, ask them, how did you navigate this crowd? What lessons did you learn that Muharram for that type of lecture? If you were to give a lecture on this topic, what ayah would you... Do you know what I mean? You'd have to ask people to show you the ropes.
Right. And what is appropriate to say on the minbar. Appropriate to say. There's a saying in
I'm
Arabic,
still learning what's appropriate.
لا كل ما يعلم يقال. Not everything that you know you should state. This comes with experience.
Yeah.
And you're doomed to make mistakes, and that's okay, because people learn from their mistakes.
Oh, the biggest mistake you can make as a speaker is thinking that you're infallible from making mistakes. You have to be ready to admit that I might have got this wrong. With hindsight, I could have changed the way I done something. But you also can't let it drag you down. Because it's very easy for shaitan to tell you, you know what, you got this wrong. You were not doing to what you should change. Okay, that's happened. I learned from it. Next. You got to move on. You can't let the previous lecture drain you. Because otherwise it can take its toll on you.
Giving constructive criticism to a speaker is something very important. Constructive, not being harsh, pulling them on the side, or maybe messaging them, not doing it in public.
And not straight after the lecture.
Not straight after the lecture.
Not
being offensive, and not doing it in public as well. Do it privately. And you start with the positives that, listen, what you talked about was very important. I liked what you said here, but you need to work on these points, for example. Giving constructive criticism builds a speaker. It builds him. He'll learn from his mistakes, or she'll learn from her mistakes in the future.
And I guess likewise, a speaker's experiences of the organization as well. I guess it works both ways if there's any constructive feedback.
Absolutely.
I think it should work both ways,
Absolutely.
On a lighter note, I'd like to ask, what's the best part about your job?
There's so much. Where do you start?
And traveling, obviously. When you're 22, I can say I was in Cape Town at 23. And Orlando, Florida at 24, and Australia, Sydney at 25.
But do you get to chill?
Yeah. Don't worry. The problem with that question
is not a holiday.
That you know me so well. So that you probably know, he does get to chill. I always say there's a time for the chill and there's a time to be serious. So all of you know that before my majalis, no one speaks to me. I'm a completely different human being. And that's because I'm about to sit in a position that has a lot of responsibility.
One thing I enjoy is, especially during Muharram, visiting different communities of Muharram, their styles of mourning.
Interesting.
And azab.
Yeah.
You go to the Pakistani community, they do it one way. Iraqis do it another. Iranians do it another. No, Iraqis themselves, if you go to a Karbala'i group, they have their own rituals.
Yes.
The Najafis do it differently. Even the Khojas themselves, they have a variety. It depends. Are you from East Africa, or are you a Khoja from Pakistan? There's different rituals on the day of Ashura, the night of Ashura, the alam that you take out. Afghans have different rituals.
Yes.
It's so interesting.
Yeah.
And you tend to appreciate.
If you've come out alive, you've done well.
Yeah.
So it's not too bad.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Good hour. We've just got a couple of quick fire questions before we round off, I guess. We've been asking speakers their favorite verse of the Holy Quran.
Go ahead.
There's so many. There's so many.
What resonates with you the most?
لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله.
Yeah.
قل لعبادي كذا. لا نعم.
قل
الذين
يا
أسرفوا
عبادي
على
الذين
أنفسهم
أسرفوا
على أنفسهم
Lovely.
لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله. Don't ever lose hope in Allah's mercy. I think this is the most hopeful verse in the Quran. No matter what you've done or committed, this verse gives hope.
Thanks.
All of the verses of the Quran.
Yeah, I'm going to go
All
with
of
the
them
same.
are lovely.
It really is a lovely verse. There's a lot of these intimate verses. You know, Surah Yasin, don't let their words grieve you. You know, that's a lovely verse, especially in line of what we've been discussing. You know, the plea that I have been defeated, help me. You know, those types of pleas. Yunus in the belly of the whale, you know, the way he talks to his Lord, Yaqub alayhi salam. I think those intimate moments where they're breaking down and they just reach out and they know that while no one else is listening, God's listening.
Yeah.
You know, the maghloob is speaking. The one who thinks that he has been one of the zalimeen is speaking. The one who has huzn for his son is speaking. The one who has huzn in himself is speaking. Those types of verses, lovely verses, yeah.
Another verse stated by Sulaiman alayhi salam, ربي أوزعني أن أشكر نعمتك التي أنعمت علي. Oh Allah, give me the opportunity to thank you, because thanking Allah requires an opportunity. It requires tawfiq from Allah, the ability to thank Allah. And I love this verse, and I try to recite it in my qunut and salah as well. So, to be given the opportunity to thank Allah for all the graces that He's done for us.
And what's the best advice you've ever received?
Oh, for lectures or general?
Generally in life.
As a speaker,
Yeah.
I was once told by another speaker
So many.
that when you're praised, don't let it get to your head. And I really thought about it, indeed. And he told me why. He said, because when you let it get to your head, a lot of people will come and praise you. Excellent lecture, beautiful topic, beautiful. You won't want to improve anymore. You say, khalas, I did it. I made it. I'm the best. I don't need to improve. And that's very dangerous. When you feel that you've reached a point where you don't need to improve, you don't need to research anymore, you don't need to read anymore. I benefited from this advice. Never let positive feedback get to you, nor negative feedback as well.
Yeah.
Because some people are affected by negative feedback. I know, khalas, this is not my thing. I'm going to stop public speaking. I can't handle the pressure. No, don't let it get to you.
I think as a speaker, the best I was given was, if you forgot to say something today, don't worry. There'll be another time to use that story. Because if you've prepared quite rigidly your structure, and you wanted to say that story, and then by the end of the lecture, you've forgotten to say that story, you could either be disappointed that I didn't make that last point or no, there'll be another day.
Yeah.
And in terms on a personal level, I think, on a personal level, maybe what I mentioned a bit earlier, that, don't look at the community that came before you negatively, rather say they did what they did. Now it's our turn to continue the evolution. Because there was a habit to turn back and say, Wallah, the adults didn't do this, they should have, the community was bad. No, they did what they can. Now we continue the good work.
Yes.
It's a different perspective of things. Okay.
Yeah, no, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been an honor having you both.
It's a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you.
Thank you for
so
having
much.
us.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you for having us.
Say them all very soon, and likewise say the same, inshallah.
Thank
Remember us in your du'as.
Thank you.
Inshallah, we look forward to Muharram 2025.
Inshallah.
Inshallah, should be exciting. Should be great service, Ya Rab. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And for those viewers at home watching, please like, comment, subscribe, and share. Inshallah, we hope to have many more world-renowned guests, speakers, orators, poets, reciters, not just from our own community, but also far and wide, broaching important subjects that are relevant to you and hopefully to keep you informed, educated, and we hope you find it very beneficial. So we look forward to welcoming you to another episode of MYF Talks. Assalamu alaikum.